This is The Toss-Up, where an expert-line panel dissects the hottest stories within the world of sports. From some of the nation's strongest college programs right here in Bloomington to the games and moments that capture the world's attention, it's all right here on The Toss-Up. Well, Indiana football is 5-5 with 2 games to go, right where everyone predicted. So it's all good, right? Not so fast, my friend. Some fans are content with where the season is right now, but a lot of fans have expressed their concern about the growth of the program as a whole. The roster is full of youngsters and it's had its fair share of injuries, so take what's happened this season with a grain of salt. But everything else aside, this team is 1 win away from a bowl game with 2 weeks remaining. All the Hoosiers have to do is win 1 game. And if it isn't an upset in Ann Arbor, it will have to be one of the biggest bucket games since the turn of the century. The final score in that one could be the difference between encouragement and disappointment. So buckle up. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Dugan, and this is The Toss-Up. Joining me on the panel this week, we have a duo of IUS TV football reporters, Joe Canner and Jimmy Sutton, and the IDS football columnist and early 2000s rock music connoisseur, Cameron Drummond. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Cameron, I'll start with you. The team is 5-5 right now, and a lot of fans seem pretty angry over the losses. Do they have a point?
I mean, I think you have to have a point when you think of the fan perspective, and this is Indiana football we're talking about, too. They've gone through so many years of the same, dog and pony show where Indiana tries to get that ranked win, they fall short, they mess up on the road or at home in a game they definitely should win, and you end up with a situation just like this. You're 5-5, just on the cusp of bowl eligibility, and you have to go through the stress and the terror of a late season win to try and reach the postseason. And I think you have a point for fans being upset because, look, if there's supposed to be progress here, you're not seeing it because the same situation that Indiana was in going all the way back to something like the 2007 season, literally the exact same situation they've been in the last 3 years. So I think you have to be upset if you're a fan because you're not seeing any marked progress from any of the coaches that have been here the past 4 or 5 times Indiana's tried to turn this program around and make it a successful winning team.
Yeah, I completely understand. I mean, Indiana came into this season, they were projected after starting 4-0, they were projected to win 8 or 9 games. So fans had high expectations. They come into this one, they lose a couple games they shouldn't have, like Minnesota and it was Iowa, I believe. They lost to those, and that brought them down. I mean, that goes from being 5-5, what they're at right now, to being 7-3, and that's a complete game changer. It'd be a completely different story if they would have won those 2 games.
I don't think fans have a right to be too upset. I mean, this is a very young football team we're talking about. Tom Allen had to completely retool the defense. A lot of turnover on that side of the ball. And the reason they started 4-5-0, whatever it was, it's because look at the teams they were playing. You got Florida International. Yes, they beat Virginia. You got Ball State, Rutgers in there. Then you get into the meat of their Big Ten schedule. You're going to have to expect some losses there. The only game I really think fans have a right to be upset about is that Minnesota game. They came out completely flat. They ended up playing up to caliber to make it a comeback, but then they weren't able to close the deal. You have that win, you're already at 6 wins. You're already bowl eligible with a team and a completely retooled defense. And then I think fans are very encouraged.
So you kind of hinted at it with your answer there, but is there any way that you can spin not making a bowl game for Indiana into sort of a pat on the back, it's all good, no need to panic quite yet?
No, you can't pad that into, an attaboy, this is the best this team could do, because this team could have made a bowl game. This team should have made a bowl game. You should have beat Minnesota at Minnesota. That's a team that's starting a freshman walk-on at quarterback, and you just came out way too flat. So no, if they go 5-7, that is discouragement. This team did not reach its potential. But to say this team had a ceiling of winning 8-9 games, that's just unrealistic.
Yeah, I think the team definitely could have done better by losing the games they shouldn't have. Like you said, they're young. They don't have a lot of experience. So I think fans have a reason to be a little upset, but I wouldn't quite panic just yet because there's a long future ahead.
Joe, you kind of touched on the defensive turnover this team has had to do, and obviously losing guys like T. Gray Scales and Chris Covington, massive losses on that side of the ball. But it's not like Tom Allen had, a 1-11 team last year or a 2 or 3 win team. This was a team that probably should have made a bowl game last year if they didn't blow that game at Maryland. So I think you have to expect them to make a bowl game this year. There's no way that this is a positive season if they don't make a bowl game, if we're all honest here.
Absolutely. That's what fans should be most discouraged about, is the pattern of Tom Allen's teams, granted this is only his second season, is that they trip up on the road when they're not supposed to. They should have won that Maryland game last year. They should have beat Minnesota this year. That's a discouraging pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cameron, we'll go to you for this one. Fill in the blank here. This is if Indiana loses to Michigan and potential bowl implications for both teams on the line in the Old Oak and Bucket game, it's the biggest bucket game since blank.
It's a big bucket game since last year's game, if we're all being honest about it. I was there in West Lafayette last year, Indiana, Purdue. Literally could have the same exact situation this season where both teams have bowl eligibility on the line. The Hoosiers came out really flat in that game, had a late fourth quarter rally, but still couldn't get over the hump and actually win that game, especially with everything that's gone on at Purdue right now and earlier this season. Maybe their coach is leaving. They have the Ohio State upset to their name. These could be really polar opposite games for their programs between Indiana and Purdue if, Purdue's able to come into Bloomington, get what would probably be maybe a slight upset win, and really just change the way both fan bases feel about their programs heading into the offseason.
I'll go ahead and say this year's is the biggest. I mean, we saw last year's, yes, was very important, and this year's it quite possibly could come down to both teams being 5-6. They both need a win to get into a bowl game, and fans had high expectations for Purdue and IU this season, so that's going to come down to a lot, and it could be a very interesting game if it comes down to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure when it's the biggest bucket game since, but this game is huge for Tom Allen. This is Tom Allen's biggest bucket game this year because the perception is around Purdue, if they're able to keep Jeff Brom, they're going in a positive direction. They're elevating their program. They beat Ohio State. Indiana doesn't have that signature win. Like I said, all the wins in Tom Allen's career are against subpar or very average teams. So for Tom Allen to be able to get a win against a team with Jeff Brom that's in a positive direction, that looks like they should go to a bowl game, that'd be huge for Tom Allen. It would change the perception of the program, I think, going into the bowl game.
Now, the narrative surrounding Jeff Brom's Boilers is that they're certainly trending in an upward direction. But Indiana finds itself in a tougher division with the exact same record. So some things are going right for this team. What's one of those things?
The biggest thing going right for this team, I think, is their downfield passing. We're starting to see Mike DeBoer open up the playbook a little bit, a tiny bit. He's opening up the playbook. And when Ramsey's throwing it downfield to those big receivers, Westbrook and Hale, they're finding success. And then guess what? Then the running game opens up. It opens up so many more things when we're able to throw the ball downfield, and we're finally getting to see a little bit of that.
I'm going to say defense. Their takeaways. They force a lot of turnovers. I believe they're at 24 on the season. I believe they lead the Big Ten, and I think they share fourth nationally. And that's just a fantastic stat line, and that's what Tom Allen preaches is defense. And if you can force turnovers, that's how they're going to beat teams.
Not to be the negative person on this panel, but I'm the columnist for the IDS, so I guess that's my job.
You're going to give opinions.
Right. It's such a double-edged sword with Indiana football, though. You talk about the offense. Mike DeBoer's opened up the playbook such a sliver to where you're still kind of banging your head against the wall. Like, why can't he just open the door the full way? Burst through the wall like the Kool-Aid Man or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Jimmy, you're talking about how the defense has all their takeaways.
Yeah.
That's great. The problem is they're either getting takeaways or they're allowing touchdowns. They're not forcing punts. They're not getting off the field consistently. So, really, there's been a little bit of consistency on offense. Haven't seen a ton of it on defense or special teams in certain areas this season. So if they can just continue to work on that, the repetition of it, getting good at those things, then maybe you can find an Indiana team in a bowl game and a team that's a bit more confident heading into the end of the season stretch.
Now, Mike DeBoer might not be opening the door all the way, but I want you to open the door all the way with this answer. What's not working for this team?
Oh, goodness. Where can we start? There's a lot of things there. Let's just focus on the defense for a second because that's where I have most of my bones to pick. We've talked about this a lot already so far. This is a young Indiana team having to replace so much production on defense, especially. We've had some nice guys come in on the linebacking core to fix in and fill in for Scales and Covington. But, man, this young secondary gets burned constantly. And even when you look at the veteran players, Jonathan Crawford's had a season with a lot of missed tackles. Andre Brown seemingly gets beat for a 40-yard route every game so far this year. So you have to think that the corners and the secondary has to really improve and elevate their play in these final 2 games of the season.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off his answer there because that's mine. The missed tackles. Like you said, you hit the nail on the head. If they're not turning you over, you're giving up points. That's the only way this defense can stop anybody is if they're turning it over, and half those have been gift wrapped to them. So they need to work on tackling, especially tackling in space against teams with more playmakers, like the best teams in the Big Ten have.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. The turnovers come out, and it's a great stat when you see it, but when you really look at it, there's a lot more to it than just that. But the thing I want to focus on is the aggressiveness on offense. You hinted at it that DeBoer has started to open up the playbook a little bit more, take some shots downfield, but over the whole time of the season, it's been quite conservative, if you ask me. I mean, I would love to see in these last 2 games for the offense to be a lot more aggressive, throw the ball down the field, and just see what else they can do.
All right, guys, we're going to cut to break here for a second, but coming up after the break, our panel is going to keep the discussion going for IU football. We're going to hand out some awards, and we're going to do our lightning round, so stick with us. Welcome back to the Toss-Up. We're talking IU football here, guys. Thank you again for joining me. It's time for Make Your Case. The rules are simple. Cameron, I think this is your first time playing this game. You two know the drill. I'm going to give you a statement. You're going to make your case as to why that's true or why that's not true. I'll start with you. The first question is make your case for the defensive MVP.
I kind of hinted at this earlier as well, but I think the trio of linebackers, again, Covington, Scales going out left a massive hole in this defense, and you have guys, T.D. Roof, the transfer from Georgia Tech, Raekwon Jones, Damian Willis Jr., 2 guys who have been here a while, haven't gotten a ton of snaps because of how good Scales and Covington were. But they've come in, they've been, as far as the defense has gone, as sure-handed tacklers as anyone. That's not saying a ton, but they've also been able to kind of command the defense well, especially looking at guys like Willis and Jones with their experience, because you've had the loss of Jacob Robinson on the defensive line for so much of the season. So those 3 guys as a collective unit, I think, have been the best on defense so far.
I'm going to go with Marcelino Ball. I think he's just all over the field. His tackling ability, you know, he may only have 1 turnover, which was a fumble recovery, but I think overall he's a leader on the field. He's all over the place, and he just makes great plays when he needs to.
Yeah, I'll make the case for Jonathan Crawford. He has had plenty of missed tackles, but just the leadership he's been able to bring to a team with no other leadership to speak of on the defensive side of the ball. I think the reason that the takeovers that Tom Allen preaches so much has taken more root this year is really because of a lot of his leadership. So I'll go with Jonathan Crawford.
Make your case for the offensive MVP.
All right, am I starting this one off? All right, offensive MVP, this is going to shock some people because a lot of people have bones to pick, especially when it comes to the quarterback position. Peyton Ramsey is my offensive MVP. He's been able to throw the ball down the field. I know a lot of people want to talk about Stevie Scott in the run game, but there were plenty of times where Stevie Scott ended up with 40, 28, 60 yards against better quality competition. Peyton Ramsey's the only player to record a touchdown for every single game for the Hoosiers. He's eclipsed 100 yards every single game for the Hoosiers. So even though he's not the most reliable quarterback, has shown progress this year. He's my offensive MVP.
I'll go ahead and just say Stevie Scott. I think he's broken a ton of records, obviously. As a true freshman, nobody was expecting it. He came into this season not even being the starting running back, being 3rd string, and he just came out and did what he was supposed to. He's really helped the Hoosiers out, and when the Hoosiers needed someone to go to, they could always rely on him.
Both of those guys have had to overcome their adversity this season. Peyton Ramsey with the QB competition to start, Stevie Scott being the 3rd guy on the depth chart. But I'm looking at a guy that kind of was in the shadows to start this season, someone like Donovan Hale, someone who we thought was going to be a big-bodied wide receiver, target down the field in Mike DeBoer's limited downfield passing type of offense. We all thought Nick Westbrook was going to be the guy in the passing game this year, but really Donovan Hale, 6 touchdown catches, has been the man to watch downfield for the Hoosiers.
Cameron, make your case why this season has been a success so far.
Oh, that's a difficult one, man. Look, you do have a good win against Virginia. It was at home. It was in sloppy conditions, but that's a team that was in the top 25 rankings for a brief second there before Pitt took them down, so that's a nice win. I think you have a win over a Big Ten team that's not named Rutgers or Illinois, so that's a good thing. And look, at the end of the day, as disappointing as some of those losses were, you are in a position where you win one of your final 2 games and you make a bowl game. And for Indiana, bowl games have been few and far to come by in the past couple years, so you might as well say that.
Yeah, and just as you hinted at, I mean, there's been some games where it's been quite promising. You know, you see some bright spots on the team, whether it's on defense or on offense, forcing the turnovers, making some big plays downfield, whether it's through Stevie Scott or Donovan Hale, like you hinted at. But overall, there's been some parts where, you know, they've been letdowns. They lose to Minnesota, they lose to Iowa, and that's just not what fans want to see, and that's not what anybody wants to see from this team. That's why it's not been a success.
Yeah, the only positives I can get from this season are those sparks from the young players that give you hope for the future. Mike Penix, Stevie Scott, some guys on defense like James Head Jr. These are promising players going forward, and I think there's a lot for IU to celebrate given the turnover on defense, the fact that they've been able to get in this position, get 5 wins at least, and compete for a bowl game. Now, it's obviously going to be seen as much more of a success as if you get that 6th win and get to a bowl game, because that'd be the 12th in Indiana's history. But if they can't, at least they saw glimmers, flashes here and there from some young, promising players.
All right, now flip that. Why has this season not been a success?
Oh, yeah, this is a bigger one. Okay, so the season has not been a success because you came out flat against Iowa, because you came out flat on the road against Minnesota, because you weren't even close to beating Michigan State at home. IU needs to be competitive. Fans aren't unrealistic. They're really not, at least here. They're not expecting a 10-win season. They're not expecting a division championship because that division's so tough. They want to be competitive, and they want a signature win just about every year. IU hasn't got a signature win in 2 years, and they haven't been very close this year in most cases. Granted, you played a good half against Ohio State, but get them a signature win, get them to a bowl game, and they'll be happy as a lark.
Yeah, and I already kind of talked about it in my last answer as well, where the games that they should have won that they did not, that's why it's not been a success. And I mean, they have one signature win, if you even want to call it a signature win against Virginia. But other than that, I mean, they don't have any big-time wins that, like you said, make the fans see a competitive nature in this team, and that's what people want to see.
Look, we all know Bloomington isn't the biggest market for college football, right? This is a basketball school. This is a basketball town. You can't be both bad and never beat the elite teams at least once in, a blue moon. Indiana's been bad and failed to get those wins for however many blue moons have passed in the history of this earth. So I think at some point you just have to do one or the other. Be consistent, make bowl games, and maybe get a bowl win, or pull off a massive upset like Purdue did earlier this year. The Hoosiers haven't done that since, I want to say, on the road at Mizzou before I was even here at school. So you have to pick one or the other, and the consistent lack of doing either is what gets this fan base so grumpy year in and year out.
All right, it's time for the lightning round. There's one rule. Your answer has to be 10 seconds or less, so pick your words wisely. Joe, we'll start with you. Who is the breakout player this year for IU football?
Stevie Scott. He's setting records all over the place. He's a fantastic addition. Mike Hart said he wasn't even expecting him to play more than 4 games this year. Stevie Scott.
I'm going to say Donovan Hale. You hinted on him as your offensive MVP. He has 7 touchdowns on the season as a receiver, and he leads the receivers for this team.
Griffin Oaks was a borderline NFL caliber kicker last year. Hoosier fans could have expected the kicking game to be mired in controversy. It's not, because Logan Justice has been really consistent, only missed 2 field goals this year.
Kicker. All right, they beat Michigan if...
Michigan doesn't get off the bus. There's a lot of traffic in Ann Arbor. No, it's going to take a perfect game from Indiana. It's going to take some turnovers from Shea Patterson, who hasn't turned the ball over a ton this season. More than anything else, it's going to take Indiana's defense corralling Karan Higdon, keeping him under 100 yards.
They're going to have to force a lot of turnovers, and they're going to have to be aggressive on offense, throwing the ball down the field.
Force turnovers, control pace of play. That's a big one. Michigan can keep you off the field. And, yeah, you got to generate turnovers against Shea Patterson. I think Karan Higdon is going to beat you. You just can't let him kill you.
They beat Purdue if...
Oh, God. They beat Purdue if they can open up the playbook all the way. If they throw it down the field like Purdue's offense is going to do, you got to score points to beat this team.
I say they want to control the clock. They want to keep Purdue off the field, and when they are on the field, they want to convert and get in the end zone.
If Indiana has a balanced offense and controls the time of possession, Stevie Scott has more than 150 yards, they beat the Boilers.
All right, it's time for last word. We're doing things a little differently this time. This time, I tell you something specific to give me your last word on. And that topic right now, Cameron, give me your one word on what a bowl berth would mean for this program. One word.
Look, I consider myself someone who looks on the bright side of things most of the time, and I'm thinking that a bowl berth for Indiana means so much because it gives you the opportunity to get that first bowl win since '93. It's a recruiting tool. It's a chance for Indiana to play on a national stage. It's a bit more money into the football program. It's everything that you want in an opportunity for a team that's kind of mired in the middle of a really difficult Big Ten division. You can't overstate enough how important a bowl berth is to this team.
So your one word is?
Important.
Okay.
Yeah, going off of what you said, there's so many factors that come into this if they make a bowl game, and so my one word is going to be crucial.
That was going to be my word. I can go off the cuff here, though.
So many words in the English language.
Safety, because if Tom Allen is able to get this team to a bowl game, he will be safe. There's no hot seat in Bloomington if you're getting to a bowl game, because that's something this team hasn't been able to do.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. 2 very important games left. But that does it for the show this week. Be sure to continue the discussion on our Twitter page at IUSTV Sports and on Facebook at IUSTV Sports. You can always give any suggestions for the show and ask any questions you might have. Toss it up. Find out if we'll catch it. We'll see you next time.